GRIMORA.
I moved into the house at Harborview Road on the first week of November, just as the coastal storms began rolling in from the Atlantic. The wind pushed against the windows with long, steady pressure, and the ocean air carried the scent of wet salt and rusted metal. The property sat alone at the edge of the shoreline, separated from the nearest neighbor by a long stretch of abandoned docks and collapsed boathouses. The landlord warned me that the house was old and the wiring unreliable. He mentioned flickering lights during storms and occasional short power outages. I did not mind. I needed quiet and a place away from people. I wanted a space where time moved slowly and nothing required attention. The inside of the house was cleaner than I expected. Wooden floors, worn but polished. A narrow staircase leading to a small upper floor. One bedroom, one study, and an attic door above the hallway ceiling. The landlord paused before leaving and looked toward the attic hatch with a stiffness in his posture. "Do not go up there. The attic has nothing you need. The door sticks, so just ignore it." He avoided meeting my eyes while he spoke. When he left, the silence that followed settled heavily inside the walls. That night, the storm intensified. Rain struck the windows in irregular bursts, and the wind shifted directions with long rising groans. I unpacked a few boxes, set a chair near the living room window, and tried to relax by listening to the storm's rhythm. Just after midnight, the power cut out. The house fell silent, except for the weather outside. I sat still, waiting for the electricity to return. A few seconds passed. Then I heard a sound that did not belong to the storm. A phone ringing. Old, mechanical, not a cell phone tone. The sound came from somewhere above me, the attic. I listened carefully to be sure. The ringing continued at a steady pace. I walked slowly down the hallway and stood beneath the attic hatch. The sound was louder there, clear, a telephone ringing behind the closed hatch. There was no phone in the house. The landlord told me the landline had been removed years ago. The ringing stopped. Silence returned. I waited, breathing slowly through the stillness. After several minutes, I stepped back and returned to the living room. Before I reached the table, the phone rang again. The sound cut through the dark with sharp clarity. The air seemed to tighten around it. I walked back toward the attic and placed my hand on the wooden panel. The ringing continued, steady, without pause. I pulled the rope and the attic door lowered slowly with a long creak of hinges. Cold air poured down from the darkness above. The stairs unfolded. The ringing echoed clearly from somewhere inside the pitch-black space. I climbed one step, then another. The phone stopped ringing. I stood still in the dark, listening to the wind press against the roof. Then I heard breathing. Not wind, not mine. Breathing, close by in the dark attic space. Slow and uneven, like someone trying to speak without voice. The sound pressed close to my ear. Then static filled the darkness, sharp and rising. The attic door slammed shut above me. The house returned to silence, and something inside that silence waited for the next ring. I stood motionless beneath the closed attic door, listening to the storm outside shake the windows with long, steady vibrations. My heartbeat slowly returned to a controlled rhythm. The static that had filled the darkness a moment earlier faded completely, leaving only the sound of wind and rain pushing against the house. I waited several minutes without moving, unsure whether the silence was safety or warning. When I finally stepped back into the hallway, the lights flickered twice and returned with a pale, unsteady glow. The storm continued unchanged. Nothing else moved. The house felt empty again, but not in any way that brought relief. The silence felt occupied. I walked to the living room and sat in the chair near the window. The ocean beyond the glass rolled like a shifting mass of black metal, barely visible in the storm. I listened to the rain without distraction until sleep came, in short, disconnected fragments. I woke to daylight pressing weakly through the clouds. The storm had not ended, only softened. The air felt heavy and damp, pressing close against skin. I checked the entire house carefully, every room, every corner. There was no phone anywhere. I considered calling the landlord, but stopped before dialing. I could already imagine the tone in his voice. I could see his expression from the night before, when he warned me not to open the attic. He knew something. He did not want to discuss it. The day passed slowly. I unpacked boxes and walked the shoreline near the house. Broken wood from the old docks washed against the rocks in slow, measured taps. The world felt suspended, as if waiting for something inevitable. By evening, the power flickered again. Lights dimmed and brightened without pattern. I sat at the kitchen table, listening to the storm growing more violent against the roof. At exactly midnight, the lights went out completely. The phone began ringing again. This time, the sound was louder, sharper, more insistent. It cut through the dark with absolute clarity. I walked toward the hallway without hesitation. My hands remained steady. I could feel the sound more than hear it, vibrating through the floorboards and into the walls. I stood beneath the attic door and waited. The ringing continued at the same pace, rhythmically precise, no variation. I pulled the rope slowly, and the attic hatch creaked open. Cold air rushed down, colder than the night before. I climbed the steps, each one groaning under my weight. The attic was almost completely dark, the storm outside blocking the moon. But in the far corner, a faint red glow emerged from the shadows. I moved closer, step by step, until the outline of an old rotary telephone emerged from the shadows. The plastic casing was cracked. The receiver hung slightly off the cradle, as though recently disturbed. The ringing stopped the moment I reached it. The phone clicked softly, and static began to fill the attic again. Not loud, a low trembling frequency like a damaged radio. For several seconds, there was nothing else. Then breathing again, slow, uneven, dragging through the speaker. I lifted the receiver slowly and held it to my ear. The breathing filled the space inside the line as if someone stood inches away. No voice, no words, only breathing. I waited, listening carefully. Then a faint tone emerged beneath the static, a mechanical sequence of beeps, steady and precise, like an automated signal. One tone, pause. Two tones, pause. Three tones. The breathing stopped abruptly. The line went dead without click or fade. I held the receiver in silence, waiting for anything further.
Nothing happened. I set the phone down gently on the cradle and stepped backward toward the stairs. The attic door closed sharply behind me with a sound that echoed through the entire house. Downstairs, the lights came back on. When I returned to the living room, I noticed something new. On the table beside the window lay a small scrap of torn paper. I did not remember seeing it before. I reached for it slowly and turned it over. 3 numbers were written in dark pencil. 3 days. I stood completely still, holding the paper. Then the attic phone rang again, once. One sharp tone. It stopped instantly, and the house fell silent.
The single ring echoed through the house with a clarity that felt sharper than any sound the storm could produce. It lingered in the air long after it ended, as though the silence held the shape of it. I placed the paper face down on the table and stood motionless in the dim light, listening for movement above me. The attic remained silent. I walked to the window and looked out toward the shoreline. The tide had risen higher than the night before, pushing waves against the rocks with slow, heavy strikes. The sky hung low with clouds that seemed fixed in place, unmoving. The world outside felt held in suspension. The paper remained where I had left it on the table. The handwriting was thin and uneven, as if written in haste or by an unsteady hand. The meaning seemed clear and direct. Whatever was coming had begun counting down. 3 days. I waited through the remainder of the night without sleeping. By morning, the storm calmed slightly, and the house felt unchanged. But the silence carried weight. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring into the quiet. Around noon, I heard footsteps approaching outside. A woman stood at the gate near the edge of the walkway. She was dressed in a heavy raincoat, her hair damp from the mist. She looked toward the house with expressionlessness, neither curious nor afraid. When I opened the door, she spoke without greeting. "You moved into the old Hanley property?" I nodded. She continued speaking with slow, measured tone. "Did he tell you about the calls?" I hesitated. She already seemed to know the answer. "They always start the same. The phone rings, the attic door opens, 3 days. People think the number is a warning. It is not. It is an appointment." I asked what she meant. The woman lowered her gaze to the ground. "He tried to stop it. The landlord. He believed the calls were connected to the accident that happened years ago. But they are older than this house, older than all of us. You cannot stop the rings. You can only decide whether you answer." She looked toward the attic window, and her voice weakened slightly. "My brother lived here before you. The phone called him for 3 nights. On the 4th night, we found the receiver off the hook and the attic door open. He was gone. His clothes were still here, his keys on the table. No sign of struggle. The wind moved through the tall grass outside, bending each blade in one direction, as if pushed by slow, deliberate breath. I asked if she had heard the phone herself. She nodded once. "The ringing does not sound like any phone you have heard. It sounds like something trying to remember how to speak." She stepped back from the gate. "The calls begin again tonight. You should not stay here." I asked where I should go. She looked at me steadily. "Anywhere else." She turned and began walking down the road. The storm clouds shifted slightly, and she disappeared into the gray distance without looking back. When night returned, I sat in the living room waiting. The lights flickered unevenly as wind pushed against the house. The ocean outside roared with force that shook the windows. At midnight, the lights extinguished again, leaving the house in darkness. The phone rang. One steady tone, extending longer than before. Then another ring. Then another. I climbed the attic stairs slowly, the wood cold beneath my hands. The red pulse glowed faintly again in the corner, illuminating the rotary phone in fragments. The phone continued ringing even after I lifted the receiver. I pressed it to my ear and listened. The ringing stopped immediately. Static filled the line, followed by the same slow, labored breathing I heard the night before. It felt closer now, as if the voice did not travel through the wire, but through the air itself. A faint sound emerged beneath the breathing, a whisper without words, a movement of air rather than speech. Then the tones returned. One tone, pause. One tone, pause. Two tones. Two numbers this time. The breathing stopped suddenly. The static cut off. The line fell silent. The lights in the attic flickered and came on for a brief second, and the flash of light, I saw something beside the phone on the table, a photograph curled at the corners, water-stained along the edges. I reached toward it slowly and lifted it into the dim glow. The picture showed a family standing in front of the house, a man, a woman, a teenage boy about 16. All three stared forward with still expressions. The boy in the picture looked familiar. I had seen his face earlier that day. The woman at the gate. Written on the back of the photo in the same unsteady handwriting, 2 days. The attic went dark again. The storm outside grew louder. Before I stepped away, the phone rang a single time. Not loud, short, like confirmation. I walked down the stairs slowly, holding the photograph. The house vibrated gently from the pressure of the wind. The phone did not ring again that night, but I knew it was not finished. The countdown had already moved forward. 2 days remaining.
Morning arrived without color. The sky hung low and uniform, a flat sheet of gray pressing against the horizon. The tide had risen again, carrying pieces of broken pier wood up to the rocks below the house. The board shifted in slow, tilting motion. Each time a wave withdrew, like the house was breathing in rhythm with the sea. I placed the photograph on the table and sat across from it, studying the faces again. The boy in the picture stood between his parents slightly forward, as if drawn closer to the camera than the others. His expression was neutral, but a faint tension around his eyes suggested something unspoken, hidden beneath the surface. The woman who visited yesterday never said his name. She never described what happened to him beyond disappearance. I wondered how often she had returned to this house, how many times she had waited for someone else to hear the calls. I walked outside and followed the shoreline path. The ocean wind pushed hard against my coat, carrying salt that settled quickly on skin. Farther down the beach, I saw a collapsed section of dock half buried in sand. Rusted bolts jutted from the broken joints, and tangled rope lay coiled near a shattered mooring post. As I stepped toward the structure, I noticed something partially buried in wet sand beneath a plank of wood, a metal object. I crouched and pulled it free. A small brass plaque, darkened with age, words engraved in fading letters. In memory of Thomas Ryland, 1994-2010. I brushed the sand away slowly. The date on the plaque matched the approximate age of the boy in the photograph, 16 years old, the same year the woman said her brother disappeared. The wind shifted direction and carried a hollow, low tone across the beach, a sound like distant machinery or an old horn echoing through heavy fog. The waves paused slightly before returning with stronger force, scattering debris along the sand. When I returned to the house, the photograph had moved. It now lay centered neatly on the table, as though placed with careful intention. The phone sat behind it, resting silently under a narrow beam of weak daylight that cut through the curtains. I waited as the daylight faded. The storm outside strengthened slowly rather than suddenly. The windows trembled at regular intervals, as if struck by invisible force. The lights inside the house dimmed unevenly and stayed low, flickering only every few minutes. At exactly midnight, the power went out again. The phone rang, one tone, then silence. I climbed the stairs, moving slowly, counting each step. The attic was darker than the night before, the storm blocking any remaining light. The red glow appeared again, steady and rhythmic. I reached the top of the stairs and walked to the phone. I lifted the receiver to my ear. Static filled the line immediately, louder than before. The frequency vibrated through the bones in my jaw and into the back of my skull.
The loudness did not feel physical. It felt internal. The breathing started again, not labored this time, controlled, deliberate, the sound of someone restraining themselves. Then a voice formed inside the static, not clear, not full words, broken fragments forcing themselves through interference. Not yet. The static surged, then softened. Listen. Silence pressed against the handset so heavily that I felt the absence of sound more than the presence of it. Then another faint phrase emerged, broken between bursts of static. 2 days. The breathing shifted to short, irregular gasps, as if the voice struggled against something unseen, not accident. The static snapped sharply, and the line went dead. I lowered the receiver slowly. Before placing it back on the cradle, the phone clicked on again by itself. A single tone played through the line, mechanical, precise, each pulse identical to the tones I heard the night before. When I returned downstairs, the photograph had changed position again. It lay at the center of the table, propped at an angle as though placed for display. Beneath it, another scrap of paper had been left. Same handwriting, same uneven pressure. Not accident. They stopped the call. I sat in the dark, looking at the paper and listening to the wind push against the house. The storm grew louder. The walls creaked. The attic door shuddered once, though no wind touched it. The phone did not ring again that night, but the silence felt like a held breath waiting for release. And I understood something clearly. The countdown was not warning of death. It was counting toward a moment that had already happened once, a moment waiting to repeat. 2 days remained.
The storm continued without pause through the night and into the morning. The sky remained the same solid gray, neither brightening nor darkening, as if time itself refused to progress. The ocean struck against the rocks with steady force, each wave identical to the one before it. The world around the house felt suspended, waiting. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photograph of the family and the scrap of paper beneath it. The message written there remained fixed in my mind, repeating without sound. Not accident. They stopped the call. A question formed slowly. If the tragedy was not accidental, what had been prevented? And why would someone stop a call rather than answer it? In the afternoon, I walked the shoreline again. The tide had retreated, revealing long stretches of wet, dark sand and broken wood pulled from the old docks. I followed the waterline back toward the collapsed pier. The brass memorial plaque I found yesterday was half buried again, packed deeper into the sand by the tide. The engraved name remained visible. Thomas Ryland, 1994-2010, 16 years old. 2 days from the date associated with the countdown. I stood for a long moment, listening to the wind shift direction. It carried faint echoes of something metallic, sharp and rhythmic, like an object striking steel at regular intervals. I could not tell whether the sound came from offshore or inside the house behind me. When I returned to the property, a car sat parked at the edge of the driveway. The woman from 2 days earlier stood near the gate, holding a set of old keys in her hand. She looked toward the house without expression. "He did not answer on the 3rd night," she said. "He tried to ignore it. He believed silence would break whatever was happening. But silence is what they wanted. They needed space to finish what began." I asked what she meant. Her voice thinned. The phone was meant to connect him to someone who could help, someone who was already gone.
They cut the line before it connected. They stopped the call. He died trying to reach someone who could not reach back. She looked at the attic window again. Her hands trembled slightly. He called me in the middle of the night. I heard the phone ring, and I did not answer. I thought he was safe here. I thought nothing could happen. The next morning, he was gone. The wind pulled her coat tightly around her shoulders. Her voice fell quiet. You cannot save him now, but you can finish the call they stopped. If you try to run, the phone will still follow you. If you stay, you must listen to the final ring. She stepped backward toward her car. Before leaving, she spoke a final time. If you hear your name, do not respond. If you hear someone you love, close your eyes. On the last night, the line opens. She drove away without waiting for reply. The sun set more quickly than any previous night. The storm clouds pulled together tightly, blocking the horizon. The house darkened hours before midnight. I sat in the living room, listening to the slow, rhythmic crash of waves against the rocks. The lights flickered again and dimmed until only a weak orange glow remained. At exactly midnight, the lights went out. The phone rang, not ringing like before, not one tone at a time, a continuous rising signal, longer and deeper, vibrating through the house like a warning siren buried beneath the floor. Each pulse tightened the air around me, pressing against my ribs and lungs. I climbed the attic stairs slowly. The red glow no longer pulsed. It burned steadily, illuminating the far corner. The rotary phone sat untouched, positioned exactly where it had been the night before. I lifted the receiver. No static this time. Silence. Then, slowly, the breathing returned. Not strained, controlled, steady, close enough that I felt its shape inside the space behind my ear. I listened without movement. A voice emerged, soft and uneven, struggling through the line as if climbing through water. They never meant to save us. The voice paused, breath shallow. We called for help. Another pause, shorter. They cut the line. A low hum rolled through the phone. The voice returned, sharper now. 2 days. The hum deepened, echoing like distant thunder. Not for you. The words separated with long gaps. For them. The line crackled, then the tones returned. 1 tone, pause. 1 tone, pause. 1 tone. 3 identical signals. The breathing faded slowly, and the line clicked silent. I placed the receiver back onto the cradle. When I turned to leave, I saw another scrap of paper resting on top the stair. The handwriting matched the others. Tomorrow, 1 day. I picked up the paper and walked down the stairs. The house felt heavier than before. The walls seemed closer. The silence had changed. It was no longer waiting. It was preparing. The phone did not ring again that night, but something about the air inside the house felt like the moment before water breaks through a dam. 1 day remained.
Morning arrived without sunrise. The sky did not brighten. It remained the same flat gray color, as if the world had stopped acknowledging daylight. The storm continued, but the wind no longer moved unevenly. It pushed against the house in a steady rhythm, like a slow heartbeat pressing against the walls. I moved through the rooms carefully, checking every window and door. Nothing was misplaced. Nothing moved, yet the air inside the house felt different, heavier, thicker, as if something unseen occupied the space between each breath. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the newest paper scrap. Tomorrow, one day. The words rested like a weight across the surface. I lifted the photograph again, looking closely at the boy in the center. His expression, once flat, now appeared strained. His eyes seemed to carry the shape of someone who had known fear long before the moment captured. The woman at the gate said silence was what they wanted. Silence allowed them to finish what had begun. The phone was not a tool of torment. It was a bridge, a connection left unfinished. My thoughts turned back to the tones that played through the line. 3 tones on the first night, 3 tones on the second, 3 tones on the third. Each night slower, deeper, sharper, not counting time, marking distance, a signal, a path. At dusk, the lights dimmed again. The storm increased abruptly, striking the house hard enough that dust fell from the rafters above the staircase. The sound of the waves against the rocks outside changed, gaining a deep, hollow resonance like water hitting the inside of a metal hull. I stood beneath the attic door long before midnight, waiting. The silence inside the house felt absolute. Even the sound of the wind seemed to fade into something distant. Seconds before midnight, the phone rang, once, then stopped. No repeated signal, no rhythm, just a short, sharp ring, final. I pulled the attic door open and climbed slowly. The red glow was gone. The attic hung in complete darkness. I moved by memory, placing my hand on the table where the phone sat. The receiver was already off the hook. I lifted it carefully. No static, no breathing, only silence. A silence filled with pressure rather than emptiness. A silence that felt full. I waited. Then I heard a sound behind me. Not from the phone, footsteps. Slow, even, heavy, crossing the attic floor, one step at a time. I did not turn. The footsteps stopped a few feet behind me. I could feel the shift in the air as if someone stood there, motionless, breathing without sound. Then a voice spoke, not through the line, directly behind me. It did not sound like the broken voice from the previous night, not like the woman outside, not like static pressed into speech. It sounded like someone alive, someone close enough that I could feel the warmth of breath against the side of my neck. Do not turn around. The voice was quiet, steady, and controlled. It continued speaking. They closed the line before the call connected. They cut it so no one could hear what we were trying to say. We were not meant to be saved. We were meant to be silenced. The attic floor creaked slightly beneath shifting weight. Tomorrow, the line opens again. When it does, listen. Do not answer. Do not speak. Just listen. The presence stepped closer. If you answer, everything ends. The attic air tightened suddenly. Then the voice spoke one final time. One day. The footsteps retreated slowly until they stopped completely. I lowered the receiver. The line remained dead. Then behind me, the attic door slammed shut with a force that shook the entire house. The darkness swallowed everything. I stood motionless, breathing slowly, waiting for the next sound. It never came. When the storm quieted just before dawn, I descended the stairs. On the table lay a new scrap of paper. The handwriting remained the same. Tonight, I placed it down gently beside the others. The lights flickered once, but did not restore fully. The storm outside softened until only the steady rhythm of waves remained. The house felt like a sealed chamber, holding breath until the exact moment required. One night,
remained. One final call.
Night arrived without transition. One moment the sky held a dim gray glow. The next, it turned fully black without any sign of dusk. The storm outside paused as if the weather itself had been suspended. The wind stopped. The rain stopped. The ocean waves fell silent. The house stood in complete stillness. I sat in the living room with the photograph and the scraps of paper arranged in a row on the table. The numbers represented a countdown that no longer counted time. They marked distance between two events, separated by years and by silence. 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, tonight. Just before midnight, the lights in the house dimmed, but did not go out completely. The faint orange glow remained constant. The air inside the room grew colder, tightening around my skin like pressure from deep water. The phone did not ring at midnight. Instead, the attic door opened by itself. The hinges moved slowly without sound. The wooden ladder unfolded downward, one section at a time. I walked toward it without hesitation and climbed into the darkness above. The attic was illuminated by a pale white light with no visible source. The rotary phone sat on the table where it always rested. The receiver remained on the cradle. A thin line of dust formed a circle around it, as though something had hovered there for years without moving. I lifted the receiver. No static, no breathing, no voice, only silence. I held the phone to my ear and listened. Seconds passed. Then the silence shifted. It changed shape. It grew heavier, denser, as if someone on the other side began breathing without producing sound. Then a faint echo emerged. Not a voice, a distant sound like water striking metal. It repeated in even rhythm. I recognized the pattern. Waves hitting a boat hull. The sound grew clearer. The rhythm tightened. The water hit faster. The storm returned beyond the walls, though not inside the house. The wood beneath my feet vibrated. A faint voice emerged from within the sound, not broken, not strained, soft and steady. We were waiting for help. The voice paused. The line was open. The sound of waves grew louder, rising until individual strikes blurred into continuous roar. They hung up. They cut the call. They did not let us speak. A second voice entered the line, younger, brittle at the edges. We did not drown. We burned. The attic filled with the smell of smoke. Not fresh, old, like charred wood long cooled. The voices overlapped one another. The boat caught fire. The engine. The flames reached the fuel. We tried to call. The phone connected. Then someone ended the call. The breathing returned, slow, uneven. They were supposed to answer. They heard us. They walked away. The waves struck harder against the imagined hull. Water poured through the sound until the attic itself felt submerged under weight. One voice remained. They will not let us speak unless someone listens. Do not answer. Listen. The wave sound stopped abruptly. Silence returned. Then the final message reached through the line. This is not your death. This is our truth. You must be the voice we lost. The attic light dimmed. A faint image formed on the wall in front of me. Not reflection, not projection. A memory. A burning boat drifting toward the rocks. Flames rising through broken wood. Figures on deck pounding against the hull, one holding a phone against his ear, screaming without words. The phone line cut. The signal died. The boat collapsed into the ocean. The water swallowed the fire. The image dissolved.
The phone clicked softly, and I heard the final tone, one long signal holding steady. It did not stop. It continued without break, rising slightly in pitch. Then the voice spoke once more. "Say it for us." I understood, not answering a call, completing a sentence, giving voice to something unfinished. I spoke slowly, with steady breath. "Help us." The tone stopped. The attic filled with silence. Then I felt movement in the air, a shift of pressure like wind passing through a narrow opening. The temperature changed. Warmth spread slowly outward. The light inside the attic brightened until the space glowed white. When it faded, the phone on the table was gone. The scraps of paper were gone. The photograph was gone. The attic looked empty, untouched, and ordinary. When I walked downstairs, the storm outside had ended. The ocean moved quietly. The sky opened slightly, revealing pale morning light. The house no longer carried weight in the air. The silence felt final and complete. Later that day, I returned to the shoreline. The tide was low. In the wet sand, I found a new metal plaque resting clean and unburied, engraved clearly. Thomas Ryland, 1994 to 2010, helped at last. I stood listening to the water move calmly across the rocks. The sound of a phone ringing never returned. I left the house on Harborview Road the next morning. The attic door remained open behind me. The silence followed, but did not cling. It felt like release. It felt like peace. GRIMORA.